नमस्कार। साहित्य अकादमी द्वारा असमिया के प्रतिष्ठित साहित्यकार वीरेंद्र कुमार भट्टाचार्य के जन्मशती के अवसर पर आयोजित 2 दिवसीय संगोष्ठी के दूसरे दिन के तीसरे सत्र में आप सभी का हार्दिक स्वागत है। मित्रों, आज के इस सत्र की अध्यक्षता कर रहे हैं असमिया के प्रतिष्ठित कथाकार श्री कुलधर सहिकिया जी और हमारे साथ 3 पेपर रीडर्स हैं, श्री विकास चौधरी जी, श्री निर्मल कांति भट्टाचार्य जी और प्रोफेसर सत्यकांत ठाकुर जी। आप सभी का हार्दिक स्वागत है, अभिनंदन है। मित्रों, कार्यक्रम शुरू करने के लिए मैं अनुरोध कर रहा हूँ कुलधर सहिकिया जी से अपनी व्यवस्था करते हुए।
Namaskar, good morning to all of you, and welcome back again. We will take it forward where we left yesterday, and we are sitting all together again to talk about in more details about the creativity and creation of none other than Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya, a very memorable personality and a writer of Assam. As I said yesterday, there are multiple areas, multiple spheres where he left his legacies, whether fictions, poetry, journalism, writing prose of different nature, all things he tried and became so successful that people of Assam still feel that his legacy goes beyond his lifetime. In fact, during his time, he had influenced a number of young writers that time to write on different topics for his magazine called Rabindra. And I feel we should be taking up some issues about how he really approached when he went for crafting the story, how he really wanted a story should go ahead, how the story should keep the readers engaged in these stories, and finally how the resolution came at the end of it. So today we'll talk a little bit about his crafting the narrative style of Birendra Kumar. We know very clearly that he was a person who had written a number of novels. I think that it was around 20 novels, and almost all the novels had attracted people's attention, and there was a heavy readership of such novels. Though we keep talking about only 3-4 initially, like Yarwingam, which was based on the turmoil, political, socio-economic turmoil in Nagaland earlier. Then we talk about Mrityunjay, which was placed in the background of 1942's movements and different sorts of plights, tortures the Indians, the fighters, the people who fought against the Britishers had gone through. All sorts of things are figured, and another very important novel was, we keep talking about I, I means mother. These few novels we keep talking about, but there are some more novels like Rajpotherinia, the road rings, like that, or the road years, that type of translation. So there also we talked about the conflict between the father and the son, not only in terms of job, career, but in terms of ideologies, and where the father was the entity of the existing authority. That time he was a police inspector, and his son was basically fighting against the state authority because he wanted a sort of socialistic pattern or socialism to flourish in the society because he thought that only the toiling masses can get their due only through such ideologies. So there was a fight between the father and the son apparently, but it was a fight between two types of ideologies and two ways of looking at the society. So that was very important from that point of view. Then you have Satagni, you have cover and full, meaning the grape and the flower, which was based on the during the Bangladesh war and Bangladesh episode in the history. So everywhere you can see a tinge of political history or political situations where he brought in not only the eco-political situations but also the human relations, the conflict between different generations and the conflict between a person who will fight against the state authority as well as the Britishers or whoever it was. In fact, he was, Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya is well remembered for placing the novel on industrial disputes, trade union movements, and how particularly the conflict between the owners, Malik or whatever, the owners and the ordinary level class. Maybe it may be in tea gardens, it may be in some oil industry in our country. Such type of various themes were taken, but there is a particular trade, as I was saying, the common trade which was tying up all these novels that was called political situations, political ideologies, almost all the novels. But see, in the novel I, the mother, very often people talk about the mother. It was like the universal, representing the universal motherhood of Maxim Gorky's mother. Right? A lot many times it has been said. But the narrative style of Birendra was absolutely different. Maxim Gorky was talking about a situation where the fight was against the Tsarist regime or whatever, right? In Assam, the situation was not like that. Assam, the situation is different. Different types of social pulls and places figured in Mother, in I, that particular novel by Birendra. There's a situation, there's a depiction in the novel. Somebody asked who is the, generally we call our mother Ma, all right? But here, the mother is called I, or she is the mother of everyone. That's what the dialogue says. She is not the mother of a person, particular person. She is the mother of everyone, like Gorky's, Maxim Gorky's book also. Anyway, those will come later, but today's session is on crafting a unique narrative voice. How did Birendra use the different styles, if it was, then how did he use his way of story writing and storytelling? See, normally we understand that in creating a narrative, we must have a very well-defined plot. That's what we feel, the plot of the story. How we develop that plot, that is going to be the matter of discussion today. How we develop the different plots in his storybooks or in fiction or whatever he wanted to write on. And second question which will figure today, not only the plot is important in any sort of fiction writing or non-fiction, whatever, but what was the theme, general theme of the book? That is also to be looked at, because generally for example, Mrityunjay is a very famous book because that book not only got people's likes, but it had won the Jnanpith Award for him. So in Mrityunjay, what is the general theme around which the stories revolved. That is what the matter of discussions today. In fact, if you look at how multiple characters were developing in that book, the theme was very clear. It's a fight between the freedoms fighters that time in 1942s and the Britishers. That is a general broad theme under which how he has placed his characters and developed those, because every character had its own role, and it's a momentous work by Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya to bring together those different characters, to go into their mindsets, to see the psychological pulls and pressures of those characters, and how to channelize them towards a particular resolution at the end. So that was very important, and how he done it with a master stroke, in fact, to read the book. Because when I read it personally, I remember, I just wanted to leave a particular page this much today, and tomorrow I read. But then again, I turned the page around and I thought, no, let me read the next page. It was such an engrossing book. What made that book so engrossing? It is because of the fact that all the characters, they were brought together, their conflicts were discussed and analyzed through different incidents, through their love, through their relationship, through their interactions with the society. All things were taken care of that way. Now, all right, we understand now he has taken multiple characters. In different books also, we have seen different characters coming out in all the books. Say, if we talk about Rabindra, which was set against the experience of the author in the turmoil period of Nagaland or Northeast, Manipur and things like that. In that time also, in that book also, he has put up in such a way that the different, like Veer Sangh, one very important character, he was believing in non-violence. When he talks, as a reader, you feel that you are following, you are really pursuing his dialogues in your personal life. Then, when you are put in a conflicting situation by the person in front about, appreciating the violence, then you feel, oh, the other character is telling the truth. Such is the quality of a great writer. You move with the different characters, with their dialogues, with their movement. So that was important, and I think all those things will figure in the discussions of other persons, very important persons we have today. Then, another thing, in any narratives of a fiction, you would like to know the place, how the place has been set up, because nothing happens in the emptiness. So how he has defined that particular place. See, Mrityunjay was set up against the derailment, against the attempted derailment of so as conspiracy, quote unquote, where the British soldiers were moving. A lot of people came together that the train should be derailed and the bridges should be cut so that there is no movement of British force. That would be a fight against them. Now, the place was set up in such a manner that Mohoda Gusal was one of the chief characters. Now, when you read the book, you feel that the village, the place, is your neighborhood, such brilliant exposition of that particular area. If you go to those areas, you will see, yes, it was like my neighboring village. So the descriptions of those time, basically the natural scenario, whatever, the houses, the customs, the traditions, all came in such a vivid manner that people could identify. The readers could identify all the settings. That has to be remembered. In fact, all the novels, when Mahatma Gosai was taking the gun, to shoot at somebody, some Britishers or whatever, then we could see sort of a Lakshmi owl, what is they call what? Lakshmi owl. It's a special type of owl, right? Yeah, it's taken to be a symbol of something good. So that was placed around that. So generally it was felt that something good is going to attain. But the same Mahatma Gosai, how the writer is taking the readers to forward through his narrative style. See, same Mahatma Gosai, after some time he says, look, my hands are filled with blood of the soldiers killed or whatever in the whole attempt, right? Yeah. So that is what, suddenly there is a trigger setting, the trigger in the sense that people get triggered that, okay, this is what I must read how he is feeling now, what is the psychology of Mahatma Gosai now when he feels that, that Shakespeare, like the Shakespearean play, when he feels there's blood in his hand. Such things were very nicely narrated. Here the writer, he used very good narratives on those. That is what the brilliant crafting of narrative by him. Then another point we might like to discuss today, along with other people. See, lot many times, particularly in today's world, people do see how a book started. If you remember, in George Orwell's 1984, he started with a particular line, if I remember it correctly, the clock strikes at 1300 or something like that, 1300 like that hour. What it means? Immediately when that time the time was 1 to 12, then again it starts from 1. Now the first line of George Orwell's book will put the reader in such a manner, oh, something is going to happen now. Because that time in 1940s, the watch was not counted as in 24-hour system, 1 to 12, then it will come back. But the moment he said the clock strikes at 13 or beyond 12, in particular number which was not existing, people start reading that book. There are a lot of such instances. You read some books where really readers are taken aback and or put into a tremendous amount of curiosity to read that book because how it started. I'm saying maybe you may not find such line in the beginning or the first line of the book very interesting. Somebody might not find it in Birendra Kumar book. But as well, the ending is also important. Say, for example, I tell you, in Centenary, by the end of the book, you really cannot decide whether love story which was running underneath, whether that succeeded or not. The reader has to now take his own hypothesis whether it succeeded. Right? Akademi was based on the Chinese war, right? How very interesting to read that book where the conflict. Birendra Kummar's books always the storylines, story narratives always always put contradictions to the readers. There, the contradiction was very clear whether love for the country or love for the person is important, right? There's a whole debate and dialogues on that amongst the characters. So such type of things, I think we must look at when we talk about how the craft of narratives was in case of Birendra Bhattacharyya. Now, I have three very important speakers, so they will take it forward on this and simple. I was talking about novel, but if if you look at even stories, there are two very important story books, Satsori, Athori, and another was, I forgot the name of the book, but the Kolong Ajiu Boy, So the river column, it still flows today, even today, like it sounds like in my ears, like, and flows the, what is the river? Don. Yeah. So, yeah, that Russian book, So, and quite flows the Don, right? That's what it says. Now, in that book also, that story books, if you read, there are small little conflicts coming everywhere between the characters. There's a story called A Japanese Girl, short story. What is so good about that particular story? See, this is a story where the situation of nuclear bombardment has been so beautifully depicted, number one. Number two, in that book, in that story, very important thing to be noticed, that the narratives have been used in such a way that you have no non-Japanese characters in that story. Normally when you write stories in foreign setting, who is generally plays a particular character. Say if an Assamese person is writing it, so if my story setup is in America or some other countries, I'll place an Assamese observer for the stories. But here's a story. The uniqueness of this story is he's setting it up in Japan. He's not placing any foreigners, any Indians or Assamese there. So these are all about studying the day from my side, and I'm sure all the speakers will have their own craft of talking. So I'll leave it to them, and let's see how things will proceed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sahitya. Now I will request Professor Vikas Chaudhary for his paper. He is a professor in the Department of English, Guwahati University, and a noted Assamese and English scholar. He is the author of various important books, besides several edited books. He is literary editor of the Assamese and Northeastern sections of the online journal News India. He writes a fortnightly column on world writing in the Assam Review called Loving Literature. He is also currently servicing as the director of Guwahati University Press. Many of his written chapters in Assamese and English are included in the course books of different colleges and universities. Professor Vikas Chaudhary.
Thank you, Devaji. Respected Chair Pulohake Langoria, my fellow panel panelists, Nimal Bhattacharyya, Sir, Dr. Rabindra Kumar Bhattacharyya, and members of the audience. Today is the second day of this very important national seminar on the doyen of Assamese literature, Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya. And my deliberation is going to be on his craft, as Pulodaras talked about, and his narrative technique. I would not like to start with his fiction. We have had quite a few takes on his writing, especially the two very important novels. I would like to start with a point that he made around 5960 in one of his editorials in Ramdhen. And in an article, if I were to translate the article, the editorial, it was Upannakar Katha, so let's say it's on the novel. And in that, he made some very interesting points. That was a time when he had, as a novelist, just ventured into the terrain. But as an editor, this was something that he was speaking with experience. Now we know that the editor's task is considerably challenging, primarily because the editor has to filter out a lot of things. And so one of the challenges of the editor, we have two very eminent editors here. One of the challenging tasks of the editor is to condense and compact the material within the limited space. So it's popular among Assamese readers, and how Tolstoy, the importance of the Assamese writer, Assamese novelist, developing a particular idiom where the Assamese mind, the Assamese intellect, the Assamese imagination would find reflection. So without really articulating it elaborately, what he was talking about, the need for a novelist to develop a particular kind of a craft that attended to the immediate concerns of local society. On the other hand, in another editorial on titled Struggle may not quite apply in the understanding of Assam's role in India's independence movement. Now these are things which are often missed because we have a grand narrative of the freedom struggle, and then we have the localized episodic accounts where we focus on anecdotes. Now in crafting his fiction, and this is something I find significant because just now the Russian names cropped up. We refer to Gorky's mother. Just now there was a reference to Sholokov's Quite Close the Dawn. And I have talked about Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. There was a Russian formalist thinker. He was writing in the early part of the 20th century, almost 100 years ago. But only after his death in 1975, in the early 1980s, the translations began to come. These translations were initially published by University of Texas and subsequently by American universities. He is Mikhail Bakhtin. Now, I'm pretty sure that Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya had not read Mikhail Bakhtin because Bakhtin's translations were not available. But what Bakhtin talks about in one of his books called The Dialogic Imagination, which is a collection of 4 essays which were in translation in English, there he talks about a very interesting point in an essay called, a chapter called Epic of the Novel. And there Bakhtin says the novel is the supreme form. And he says the novel is the supreme form because it has a dialogic zone. Now what is a dialogic zone? In a dialogic zone, the characters exist by themselves independent of the author. So, on the one hand, there is a projection, normally, when you read novels, that the novels mirror the authorial intention. So, we normally try to understand a text on the basis of the idea that the text is a carrier, the novel is a carrier of the author's philosophy. I'm talking of fiction. Now, Bakhtin said yes and no. No, because when we come to meet the characters are completely individualized. So, if we take the case of Yarvingam, and if you look at these characters, the women characters, we see that their individualization is because they exist in a dialogic space. And he points out that Dostoevsky was a master of this process where he could bring about the polyphony of voices. So each of these characters had an individual voice. Now what is this individual voice? That we can now distinguish character A from character B or character B from character C. So a novelist who has mastered the craft is able to bring about this distinction, maybe through language, through the use of dialect, through the use of expression, through the use of silence. And in Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya's novels, especially in his accomplished novels, we find that this element is very much present. So I feel that when we look at his fiction, and when we look at his fiction as an exercise in this process of marking the dialogic space, where these characters interact as individuals, but not as different voices articulating the same voice. This is a very important aspect, because when we look at, see, as Kurana pointed out, he wrote many novels. And a challenge for a novelist is the path that is taken. For instance, if you look at the two novelists, English novelists that Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya mentioned, one is John Bunyan, who was a 7th century writer, prose writer, and he was a Puritan, so he was writing about, his most famous book is Business Progress. Bhattacharya has a chapter on his business progress as well. So it is an allegorical frame, and here more or less all the characters, the whole narrative focuses on a particular principle, the Christian path. Whereas, if you, the other novels that I mentioned, D.H. Lawrence, D.H. again writes about a particular principle of life, which he believes to be the life. He talks about the vision of life that which he believed, which he understood to be valid. So that is one path. A novelist chooses to embark on a path and say, okay, all my novels will converge on one particular philosophy, one particular theme, and they will all address those different issues. The other path is that some novelists take, where each novel is an experiment, or each novel is a departure. So two novels of the same novelist may not be in agreement in terms of craft, in terms of the process of visualization, thematization, characterization. So if we look at novelists of his time, novelists that Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya has referred to, he has referred to Joyce, he has referred to Woolf, he has referred to many English novelists. Now the point is, what did he take from them in the writing of these novels? What did he bring to the historicization that he embeds in his fiction? That his fiction is, let's say, a site of history making. How does he go about it? Now what I found fascinating in reading some of his novels is that I think as a writer, in making the plot, and in, let's say, like an architect designing a house, he had different plans for different novels. So let's say in mapping of the text, in mapping of the narrative space, in the work before the making of the novel, and that is something which I feel is worthy of excavation. So if I am to borrow two terms outside the discipline, one is archaeology and one is architecture. And I like to see these two domains, architecture as a mapping of something that doesn't exist. So how does it map? And the other is, archaeology is, how do we, after the work is finished, how do we really try to understand what is behind the text? One is what goes before the making of text, and what is the product like that we receive. Now, there was a French architect who is familiar to all of us, who has had a great contribution in the making of the La Corbusier. And La Corbusier, in a book which is his major book in 1923, 100 years ago, called Towards a New Architecture, he made a very important distinction. He said that all houses or buildings are made up of straight lines. And if you come to think about it, this is a house made of straight lines. So the straight lines intersect in different ways. Now, what we can gather from this process of this architectural makeup is that a plot can be seen as, say, an intersection of multiple straight lines. Okay? it's a building, we build on a structure and we then visualize and then it stands. It's a foundation and then we have a structure. Now, on the one hand, Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya as a novelist was a realist. He was writing for a particular kind of audience. So he was interested in projecting, presenting reality in terms of felt experience. But he's a great writer. And where does that greatness come from? I think it comes from this attention to the nuances of really architecturally building up a structure that attends to the theme. So, as students of literature, we talk about the convergence of form and content. And sometimes the form is overwhelming, so the content goes underneath. Sometimes the content is overwhelming, the form is invisible. And I think because of the heaviness of the focus on, say, in Irvington, on the non-Assamese situation, in the sense that he talks about Risan-Keshing, he talks about the Naga situation, he talks of the turmoil, the conflict, the historical process. I think the architecture that makes the novel, I think that has been unattended. I think that is something that is part of the craft. That we are so focused on reading and attending to the very, very classic primary reader's question, what happens next? So we are so focused on what happens next. And then we are also focused on trying to draw parallels between what happens next and then trying to equate it with history. We're saying, okay, this is what happened or this is where it is departing. Because our focus has been on that throughout in the interpretation, in the understanding of the Irvington, we have missed the architecture. And I think the architecture that holds the novel, holds the narrative, is something that has gone underneath. It is not invisible, but we have somehow refrained ourselves from looking at that. So we are focusing on the character, we are focusing on the situation, we are focusing on the situation of rule. So we are very much concerned with the material, but not what really went into the making of it. So I'm more interested in how that has come about. Because if we are to see this as a living novel beyond its own time, so we must see how the archaeology through which you can interpret and how the architecture that is behind its making, both of these aspects are very, very crucial. Now, if we look at these characters, what is striking for us and what I find important is how these characters are, on the one hand, historically identifiable, and on the other hand, they exist as figures on their own. So, what he does is very, very cleverly, skillfully, he just puts the ball in the court of the reader. Now, the onus is on the reader to decide to read this as a realistic novel, as a historical novel, as a novel of substance, and he leaves the door open, but I think as readers, as Assamese readers, we have closed it. And why I say we have closed it? Because we have more or less placed it in a position where we say Yarwingam. I'm just taking an example. Yarwingam is a novel of its time that talks about culture, history, and location. But then, great historical novels are not about its own time alone. So Yarwingam is as much of its time, but also about how historical novels can be represented, or how representation can be orchestrated in a historical novel. I am not saying this is the only way, but what Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya offers us is showing us, see, this is how we can do. And a great master is always able to make the craft invisible. So in a way, he is taking us on a track So as readers, he's our guide, and we go with him. We move through these different places, and we meet these different characters, Putila and Saranga, everyone, we meet them. So we enter their worlds, we enter their minds, we enter their experiences. So we feel that, okay, they're around us. But who is controlling it all? Is the narrator, is the speaking voice, and that speaking voice is doing it. And we are like children who are, he's offering us all these things, and we are drawn into it. So it's very tempting to be satisfied with what we have in Yaringam by these very, very realized, realistic characters and situations, and say, oh, this is a brilliant novel because it depicts something which is so real. But that is only half the journey. There's a Victorian poet called Krishna Rossity, and she has a poem called Goblin Market. So there are two sisters who go to a market, and one sister tells the other, say, don't buy this. So there are a lot of sellers and saying, okay, take this, take this, take this. And one sister tells the other, no, don't get tempted. Don't wait, see, observe. But the other sister takes it. So the moment we take it, so the moment we go with him and we really lend ourselves to the idea that Yaringam is about history, is about reality, it is a fictionalization of something that is real, it is authentic. Then I think that temptation is also the trap for the reader. I think Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya was not really concerned about that. I think he was concerned more about telling us about the immanent nature of reality, that this reality is not confined to this alone. So, in a way, this novel, from what I have gathered, he was greatly influenced by Bunyan. So, he was looking at the metaphorical and the real, the possibilities of the metaphorical. Because I feel that if we try to understand everything in terms of reality, and a particular kind of reality, then that's closed. Because you see, this is something we have been discussing both inside the seminar and outside, is that every text, every novel, poem, play, writing has a particular topicality. Okay? So it emerges from a particular location, a particular site, a particular cultural experience. So those things will be part of it. Whether we talk of Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Shakespeare, Indian writers, Kalidasa, it will talk at a time, that time is past. But there is something transcendent in that, which is valid, which we find relevant. We will say, okay, this is something I can take from. So that reality, the transference of that reality, that is important for us. Why talking of Yaringam today? It is something that does not exist. It's a world that is in the past. So what I would like to emphasize is that Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya in Yaringam, for example, was trying to present to us through the process of history making something that is more than a lesson. It's more than a lesson in narrative. It is about a way of seeing, how we can see and how we can really organize something that seems to be of a particular present but transcends it. So the implications of that narrative extend beyond its time. It's something that goes beyond this time. And I think if we look at his craft, and if we look at the way he designs them, and my observation is based on two things. One, the reading of his novels, and the reading of his editorials. In one article in Indian literature towards the late 1970s, Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya was giving an account of the nature of Assamese writing. And there he was talking of his own practice as a novelist. He gave the example of Yaringam. It's a short paragraph, and he talks about how it stemmed from his experience. But it also came with a caveat in the sense that he was trying to tell the reader that don't read it as simply the representation of experience that I had. So what what he was trying to emphasize, that there is a very, very thin line which is like a bridge, and that bridge is for the reader to cross. Whether we are reading it as history, as documentation, or whether reading it as fiction. And there he lives it. And I think in our naivety, because we are naive, because we are not alert, sometimes we miss that point. So in a way, we try to arrive at his novels, or we try to understand his novels by looking them as content-based frames. And I think this is one challenge for us as readers. Say, I'll just take one example from another writer, say Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya. Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya is something, someone who, like Borges, the Argentinian writer Borges, is always eluding the reader. The narrator or the narrative is always a step ahead of the reader. So the reader is always playing catching up. Okay? So we are always trying to catch up with Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya, trying to understand who he is or what he's trying to say. And the moment we try to get there, then we move further. In the case of Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya, he is giving us the impression that he is going with us. So we are moving together. The moment we feel that he is with us, and that is a lure, that is a tempting feel. So we are very comfortable and confident in that space. And there, I think, it lies something for us to transcend and move forward. So I think these are some of the things that we can look at in terms of how to approach him as a writer, the novelist, through what he has written and the world that is made real in his fiction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Vivas Chaudhary ji. Now may I request Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya ji. He taught English literature at GS College, Silchar, and comparative literature at Jadavpur University, Kolkata. He served as the Regional Secretary of Sahitya Akademi Regional Office, Kolkata, and the Director of the National Book Trust, India. He also worked as the Director of K.K. Birla Foundation, New Delhi, and the Editor of Sahitya Akademi Journal, Indian Literature, and accomplished translator from Bengali into English and vice versa. His English translations of fictions have been very well received. Presently, he advises Yogi Books Delhi on commissioning and editorial matters. Say Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya.
Thank you, Devesh. Vivas was speaking so brilliantly and giving a kind of theoretical framework to Birendra was writing. They wanted him to go on and on. So I would cut down on my time also. Let me begin by expressing my gratitude to Sahitya Akademi for inviting me to speak in this seminar. It's not that I don't get invitations to seminars, but this why I'm particularly thankful for being a part of this seminar is because Birendra Babu touched my life. He was, I'm sure it has been being discussed since yesterday, his greatness as both as a person and as a scholar and a writer. I had the golden opportunity of knowing him rather closely and often breaking into his charmed inner circle also. Because when I was working for Sahitya Akademi at Calcutta, Birendra was the president of the Sahitya Akademi. Actually, I was in Delhi, but after he became president in 1988, and I was promoted and sent to Calcutta as regional secretary the same year. So I can even think that he had a hand in my promotion also. But that is beside the point. More importantly, as I interacted with him, he used to come to Calcutta quite regularly. As I interacted with him on various occasions, stayed with him in the same hotel or guest house, often taking care of him also. I came across a person who is, I've never come across a person who is so affable, so unassuming, and yet so scholarly, so much given to introspection, so much given to immersive thoughts. Something was always going on in his mind. I could see that in the domestic activities we were doing, or having a breakfast or something, then suddenly he will come up with something, some interesting dish. That means he was thinking about it through the entire breakfast. And whenever he was in Calcutta, he would tell me, take me to Professor Amiya Dev, or take me to Shankar Ghosh. I want to talk to them about this and that. So he being able to speak on his Centenary seminar is a great kind of it's a blessing for me. I think I'm blessed by this. Now coming to the seminar, some very important points have been made by my friend Sahitya and also by Divash. Sahitya Akademi asked me to present a paper, so I have written something, I'll read it out. And I was specifically asked to focus on his transition from short story to novel writing. So I'll focus mostly on his early 3 novels. But before that, as a foregrounding, what has already been talked a little, I would like to read out that portion where I try to focus on not necessarily the narrative art of Birendra Babu, but on the content of Birendra's writing, how the life he lived and the life he believed were identical. It is acknowledged on all hands today that the Assamese writer Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya was a major figure in the post-independence world of Indian letters. He has articulated in powerful and innovative ways, and in many genres, a deeply liberal vision, equally interrogative of both tradition and modernity. Again, I am reflecting something Divash was trying to tell us. His poetry, short stories, novels, and prose writings bring one face to face with almost all the major formulations, debates, and counter-debates that have shaped, reshaped, and continue to reconfigure the idea of India. Only a few writers have been able to respond to the evolving consciousness of India as a society and a culture with the intense kind of immediacy and rootedness, as Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya has done. And he has been able to achieve this without ever resorting to a simplistic or reductionistic ideological position. In him, one can see an open engagement with Gandhi, Ramana Lohiya, Karl Marx, the mystical saint poets, rationalist social reformers, all of whom figure in the fiction and essays. As far as the Bengali is concerned, he had great admiration for Ramakrishna's Kathamrita and Rabindra Tagore's Gora. I still remember how, after the Babri Masjid demolition of 1992, he would often discuss with me how the alternative model of religion in Gora could have provided India a structural basis for a pluralistic society. Then I was working as a regional secretary in Sahitya Akademi, and he would want to discuss this point with Shankar Ghosh, the great Tagore scholar and poet, and he would ask me that can we fix a time with Shankar Ghosh. So this thought within him about how a literary novel could perhaps provide a structure, a framework for Indian society and the practice of religion in India. Anyway, I have been asked to talk about Birendra early novels. If we look at it chronologically, we find that the three earliest novels, the Rajpute Ringiyai, which the chairperson mentioned, Earringam, and I also, chairperson mentioned that. These all were published in 1958, 1960 and 1960 respectively. While his first and second short story collections, Kolonga Dear Boy and Satsari, were published in 1961 and 1963 respectively. This would tell us that it is not imperative to think that there was any abrupt movement from one show to another. Perhaps he had been writing stories simultaneously and his transition to novel writing was smooth and spontaneous. However, even in his short stories also, Birendra Babu's propensity for confronting social issues, which I mentioned earlier, can be immediately noticed. Let us take two stories, Makanar Gosai and Mia Mansur. These can be easily read as negotiations and confrontations of an individual struggling for the ethical authenticity of the self. Ethical authenticity of the self within quotes. By correlating personal dilemmas which social, political and cultural conflicts impose on us. If the former could be regarded as a metaphysical dilemma, the latter suggests itself as problems of history posed by contradictions of a society in transition. If we now look at the first novel of Birendra Kumar Babu, Rajpute Ringiyai, which he himself published in 1955 and which was later published in 1960 or 61 by publisher in Guwahati. It attempts to analyze what the common people of India achieved through independence. Before independence, India was under the colonial rule, colonial rulers who patronized the rich industrialists. And these industrialists in their turn exploited the poor common people. The same oppression and exploitation continued after independence also, even though we had our own elected government. The author tried to voice the feelings of the people through Mohan, the protagonist of the novel. The Gandhian and social ideals promised during the independence movement seem to have suddenly evaporated. On the historical day of the 15th August 1947, Mohan refuses to join the fun and festivities of the public functions. So Mohan for us becomes symbolic of the Indian common man. This is one of the major strengths of Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya's writings, the fine manner in which elements of realism lead to the metaphorical and the symbolic in turn meets the historical or socio-political aspects of life. Now, I'm here, again I am referring to Bivash's period expose. This kind of amalgamation, of the personal with the historical. When you talked of Earringam, whether it's a historical novel or a social novel, I would think that when Earringam was written, it was about the contemporary reality. So I would not call it a historical novel of the time. But today, 64 years later, I would call it a historical novel. So this is how the transition happens. And then you can say that it applies to all the novels, but no, it doesn't. Because here, a historical moment which was happening at that time was being seen as a contemporary event. All the novels, the storytelling novel would not suffice to live up to that standard. This subtle transformation from the allegorical form to the realistic mode is true even of his early short stories, but become more pronounced in his novels. Birendra Kumar Bhattacharya's second novel, Earringam, which I'm sure has been talked about yesterday today also, written in 1950s and published in 1960, was centered on the Naga movement for self-determination. In the post-colonial period, this novel has often been considered a landmark literary movement in the Assamese literature, especially in the writing of political novels. Though focusing on the Naga movement, the novel was also as much about an early post-colonial Assamese literary imagination of people's rule. That is the meaning of the word Yaringom also. Today, when questions of identity, democracy, and the place of people in shaping the socio-cultural and political future of the Northeast India have become prominent, the early post-colonial novel Yaringom assumes a greater significance in the literary canon. Yaringom primarily tells the story of how three friends, Rishan, Kati, and Pandit, all of you know about it, they take three political paths in the context of socio-political transformations of the Tangkhul Naga community in the late 1940s and 1950s. The central characters of the novel are mainly Nagas, with the exception of Bhavan, an Assamese young man who was living among the Nagas. He has actually settled there. Rishan, though critical of the Indian state, explored the idea of people's rule within Indian constitutional parameters. Khatim became a military bureaucrat of the Indian state. Pandit joined the Naga nationalist movement and their struggle for self-determination vis-a-vis Indian state. The three different paths were contextualized in terms of how the Tangkhul society was responding to trends of social and cultural change among the Nagas as well as globally during the period, and its articulation of political identity in the process. But the author did not rest merely representing multiple political views prevalent among the Nagas. He took a position by locating the character of Jivan almost at the center of plot construction, which became symptomatic of Yaringom's textual rapture over the vexed Naga question. Now it is interesting to note that the characters of the novel were not essentialized, but were constituted dialectically. Therefore, though old Nazak was a nativist, the only, I'd like to take up the point of nativism later, nativist, the only person he thought who could be the bearer of his legacy was the revolutionary leader Videsil. The pronunciation is something like Videsil, who is an Angami Naga and a Christian to boot. Another example is the character of Sarangla. Her social condition was due to her capture by the Japanese soldiers in the Second World War, and because she fell in love with one of the nationalists, Ishiwara, she began to live with him until he left along with the departing Japanese soldiers, and the patriarchal order of the society did not have the scope for her normative social location at that time. So that is where history comes. Perhaps if it had happened today, she would have found a place in the patriarchal society. One of the premises that produced the scope for a dialectical understanding of society and social change in Yaringom was the conceptual choice of people. Can we call it either enlightenment or the ideal of universal human that is open for all of you to decide? But this people is the conceptual choice of Yaringom over other categories of legibility. For example, it was this choice that allowed for the creation of characters that were not merely about kinship or clan relations. Characters here are not due to kinship or clan relations, Dada, Budi, not like that. The characters here are The characters in Yaringam are aware of their historical locations and acted in accordance with their understanding of the historical role. As a result, events such as the devastating impact of the Second World War or the end of the British rule in India did not stand outside the critical grasp of the characters. The characters were conscious of the place of these incidents in their everyday larger historical life. It is this critical awareness that kept pushing the plot of the novel towards its climax. Just 2-3 lines about the next novel. I told you I will take up 3 novels. So next is I, and let us take a brief look at this. Arguably the third novel, I. In this visionary novel also, Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya dealt with the new economic order breaking into a small rural community, silencing the human spirit. What is of extraordinary value is that the story shows not only how a manipulative capitalist order marks the spiritual death of the individual who is vanquished, but also how the dehumanizing impact shatters even the one who manages to succeed in the new economic order. Then there is no triumph for the human being. There is always defeat. If that is what he is trying to tell us, then there is no victors. In this way, Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya's novels tell stories are philosophical ruminations on the already marginalized ways of life that with the passing of each day and coming of more powerful forces of advanced capitalism become absolutely irrelevant and insignificant, and hence have to meekly surrender themselves to a complete erasure of their being. At another level, these are works that examine the nature of modernity and its impact on native forms of life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kamki Bhattacharyya. And now I will request Mr. Sahitya Thakurji. He is a renowned poet and critic of Assamese literature and has 10 published books to his credit apart from number of research papers, national and internationally national journals. Presently working as professor in the Department of Assamese, Rabindra University. His poems have been translated into Hindi, English, Bengali, Spanish and French. He has served as academic member of Athens Institute for Education and Research, and his contribution as the subject expert and editor in introducing Assamese MIL at degree level by IGNOU is a significant contribution. Professor Sahitya Bhattacharyya.
Honorable Chairperson of this session, respected speakers of this session, and distinguished participants. It is indeed a matter of great privilege for me to speak a few lines about the towering figure of Indian literature, Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya, in the occasion of his birth centenary celebration. I think we are already out of time. That's why I'll try to make the lecture brief. Anyway, Dr. Bhattacharyya's before speaking about, I was advised to speak about reflection and future directions, continuing the legacy of Dr. Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya in literary studies. So before starting my speech, I must say that Dr. Bhattacharyya's emergence as a writer coincided with a period of socio-political transformation in Assam. So this is very significant when this writer was born. He was a product of history tea, oil, and coal industries has significantly altered the Assamese demographic and cultural landscape. While migration and identity issue further complicated the societal fabric. So the romantic ideals gradually becoming incapable of expression these complexities. That's why a religion of a new trend, new thought was needed now, and Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya was that was a person whom we can consider as a leader of that new trend. One of Dr. Bhattacharya's most influential contribution was his legacy as editor of Roundtable, a platform which was a magazine and that platform that redefined the Assamese literary culture. Bhattacharya nurtured the generations of writers who address complex socio-political issues, breaking away from the restrictive tradition of the past, and his insistence on critical inquiry and openness to diverse literary influences as the epicenter of Assamese modernism. That's why we should talk about the legacy of the Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya of 21st century, setting out a value part of the 21st century. In his writing, Dr. Bhattacharya tackled themes that were politically just and deeply human. Already, Professor Sobri and Bhattacharya's German already they have discussed about Yami and very deliberately. So, very descriptively. So, I didn't want to repeat it, but his all right, his maximum novels were politically just and deeply human. So this work remains a critical milestone in Indian literature, not only for the new political commentary, but also for its empathetic depiction of marginalized voices. Dr. Bhattacharya was not a writer, but also a philosopher of art and literature. I want to expand my speech from fiction to non-fiction. I will try to give some examples from these non-fiction writings, because the non-fiction writings has been depicting his philosophy, his idea, which idea has made the writer Birendra Kumar Bhattacharya. His essays reflect profound engagement with Gandhian thought and democratic socialism, and repeating Gandhian thought and democratic socialism. His work, Art and Literature in Gandhian Perspective, he emphasized the ethical responsibilities of an artist. In the light of Gandhi, he says, truthfulness is God. And he says that Gandhi was searching for his truthfulness in literature and art. He aligned Gandhian ideas and the thinkers like Rabindra, and all these influences made him critic of Marxist reality. Interestingly, he was quoting Trotsky, who was a very close ally of Lenin, but at a little period we know that he was debarred from all the administrative activities of Soviet Russia during the tenure of Stalin, and he was a main opponent of Stalin and Stalin's Marxism. So Trotsky, interestingly, Bhattacharya was quoting Trotsky, and he says that the artistic methods and Marxist methods are not the same. This was the philosophy. Often people think that Bhattacharya was a Marxist, but this is a fact, what is behind it. Dr. Bhattacharya's lyrics, particularly his evocating song, I will establish a Darbar paper. It reflects his philosophy of writer. In a writing which was written in memory of one towering writer, personality of possibility, he said that there was a dream in the song which is still alive. One day, the real power of the people will be established. When people will get this terror, they will start to sing this song. I will establish the terror of people. This was the song. These words resonate deeply with the contemporary struggle for equity and justice, reminding us the enduring relevance of his vision. As we consider the future of literary studies, Dr. Bhattacharya's legacy offers a wealth of opportunities. His pioneering use of Bhavan's technique and his engagement with the socio-political issues will provide a rich framework of interdisciplinary research and exploring his unpublished writing. Many writings have yet to be published in the compiled edition. Yes, these were published in different newspapers, periodicals, and it is now scaled in his personal library. And these unpublished writings could convey new dimensions of his literary philosophy, while comparative studies of his work from global movements could enhance our understanding of his unique contributions. His ability to balance individual creativity with collective responsibility offers a roadmap for navigating the tension between tradition and innovation. His work, ranging from fiction to non-fiction, offers critical insight into the nature of human relationship, the political landscape, and the role of artists in society. As we reflect on his legacy and future directions for literary studies, we must revisit his writings and engage with his profound ideas on art, truth, and the role of a writer. Dr. Bhattacharya's literary philosophy was marked by careful consideration of politics. And in an interview with India Today, he said, "It is a question of integration. Politics has its own influence on life, and this factor has to be taken into account in literature. But politics has its own limitations, and life has understands." This is what Bhattacharya thought about politics and literature. His exploration of Gandhian philosophy, where he emphasized that means used in political struggle are as important as the ultimate goals. He stated that unless the means are better, the objectives may not be fulfilled. Bhattacharya's works are not just political commentaries, they serve as reflections of morality, ethics, and human nature. So the idea of a world outlook is another key element of Bhattacharya's literary vision. He defined this as an integration of all human knowledge into creation of a new narrative framework. His novels, therefore, do not simply reflect a specific time or place. What Bhattacharya has told that his novels has already crossed the limit of time and space, and Bhattacharya's works require a writer to be conversant in various fields of knowledge. He aspired to study a range of disciplines and believed that moral literature demanded an understanding of not only humanities but also other disciplines. So Bhattacharya's ability to incorporate diverse intellectual traditions into fictions challenges contemporary writers to broaden the intellectual horizons and produce works that engage with the complexity of the world. Bhattacharya's philosophical approach to literature also emphasizes the pursuit of truth. He said, "You may be a worshipper of beauty for beauty. You may be a worshipper of beauty for beauty's sake, but it leads you nowhere unless you aspire to recreate forms on the basis of reality, on the basis of truth." For Bhattacharya, the search for truth in literature was paramount to beauty with truth, beauty truth loses its reference. So when faced with the needs of the world, whether it is a political system or human relationship, Bhattacharya looked at the writer must act as a creator. This act of creative rebellion, he used the term creative rebellion, and creative rebellion is not only an aesthetic pursuit, but also an ethical one. For Bhattacharya, literature is a form of resistance against a world that often fails to live up to its potential. Writers, in his view, have the responsibility to challenge the status quo, to expose its shortcomings, and to create a better future. Bhattacharya's reflection on the state of Indian literature offers valuable insight into how we should approach literary studies today. In the same contribution that India today, he said that Indian literature is a multilingual phenomenon. So, another aspect of just 2 minutes only. Another aspect of Bhattacharya's legacy is his recognition of the weight of tradition. According to him, tradition has to be assessed and reassessed and adapted. It is a question of your talent. In a country like India, where tradition plays central role, Bhattacharya's believe that writer must engage in the past and in a way that acknowledges its importance, while also finding new forms of expression. A genuine creative, he said that a genuine creative writer must have the quality to create new forms. So the challenge was not to reject the tradition, but to rework it in ways that speak to the contemporary issues. Dr. Bhattacharya's literary contributions continue to inspire and guide scholars today. His reflections on politics, the role of writer, and the future of Indian literature provide us a vision that is both grounded in the realities of the realities of the present, and open to the possibilities of the future. His legacy challenges us to move beyond conventional boundaries and to engage with literature as a tool for social transformation, intellectual engagement, and creative rebellion. As we continue to explore the future directions of literary studies, we must remember Bhattacharya's call to create literature that is both rooted in human experience and forward thinking in its exploration of new ideas and forms. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Bhattacharyya. Now may I request Sri Sahitya ji or our concluding remarks from chair for 2 minutes, and after that we go for our 10 minutes break, tea break, and then next is engagement.
And all of you had spoken on research-based papers, and I'm sure such a vast subject of craft of narration of Birendra Kumar Bhattacharyya cannot be finished in 1 hour's time. So I think it's a good exploration from all the speakers, particularly I would thank Bhavan, Bhattacharya, and Dr. Comfortable for such an illuminating speeches. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Now 10 minutes tea break.